Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. So we are going to be talking all about interviewing in this episode. And I've got someone who is essentially the interview king here. We've got Jay Fang from Interview Query. And he spent, you said what, the past 9 months, year and a half, full-time training people on how to nail their interviews?
Yeah, last 9 months, but we launched back in June of 2019. So it's been almost a year and a half of just helping people getting jobs in data science at this point.
Wow. So I guess let's start off with this specific question. What is the most common misconception or mistake that people are making in their data science or analytics interviews?
Gotcha. That's a good question. I would say that the most common mistake is the focus on technical skills. And what I mean by technical skills is definitely the kind of like hardcore elite code kind of programming type questions or potentially SQL questions as well. I think generally people don't really understand when they're coming into like the field at first how much kind of like business knowledge plays into a part in terms of like analytics, right? Or just general communication.
It's hilarious to hear you. The audience is going to think that I put you as a plant because we literally have been harping on this concept over and over and over again. And we haven't released these episodes yet, but me and Elizabeth, my co-host, record on Thursdays. We do kind of like a specific tactical video. And we were talking about like what analytic skills you need to learn. Mm-hmm. And like we kind of caveated the whole episode with there is this overinflation of how important hard skills seem.
Yeah, definitely. And you can figure that out basically because of the fact of whenever you do an interview now, a company will either do one of two things, right? They'll either, before they talk to you, you'll have like a recruiter phone screen, or they'll send you like a quick hacker rank, maybe kind of like software skills test. And, based on essentially which one they send you first, it's kind of like an indication of like what values they almost prefer at that point. Are they going to filter you out because maybe you can't communicate very well to the recruiter, or just they can pick up some red flags in terms of how you might interact in the work environment? Or do they just want to filter out everyone that can't write, either a baseline level of coding or SQL queries for their role or position that they want to fulfill, right? And so I think at the end of the day, like at the end of the process, they're testing for the whole thing, but it's kind of like a quick indication of just basically how the first step in the funnel kind of filters out people. And oftentimes you'll see that be recruiters, or it'll be like a skills test, like hackering.
Right. And we kind of went down this like almost conspiratorial rabbit hole of, I think, because I've been in the space for, I guess, 2 years now, I think that it's easier to commoditize and sell courses on hard skills.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think that marketing is why that misconception exists.
Yep. And I think it's also because you don't really think of it in terms of a frame of like behavioral skills for technical roles. Like it seems kind of not intuitive when you kind of present that fact. And it's also because, you can learn the soft skills almost through, daily interaction, how you grew up, like your environment. And then also there are the people that just kind of pitch, like soft skills as well, kind of like behavioral psychology, and just generally how you should present yourself. The best example probably is like the How to Win Friends and Influence People book.
I read, my dad gave me that book. My dad was, he's like a hardcore sales guy. And actually before I went back to get my MBA, I was doing 100% commission insurance sales, which was a nightmare.
Oh yeah.
But I got really accustomed to like a absurdly high amount of rejection, getting rejected 20 times a day, every day.
Oh, wow.
And then also like I've kind of learned how valuable selling. Well, I guess if we were to kind of pit it or frame it in the data science or analytics space is kind of getting buy-in on your ideas. That's where your sales skills come into play, I think.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. And it's essentially how most people, I think, should think about it, right? It's kind of like almost, there are certain sets of skills that you need to kind of communicate within the workplace. Some matter more than others, depending on the job that you take. For technical roles, people usually just think it, doesn't matter at all. And that's just definitely not the case at all. And it's a pretty common misconception, I think, going back to that point. But I think within analytics, especially, it's the terminology and like the way it gets marketed, right? It's like a technical degree. It's technical. You're doing like data analysis and stuff, but they just don't realize that, the other half of it is communicating results. You can't just do the work and then expect it to be all good once you, finish running the analytics, because the whole like output what you're putting out is, an actual analysis and like showing this analysis to other people, right? It's not like in engineering, when you finish a piece of code, it goes into a computer, right, on the cloud, and that's your output. Like this output is obviously you telling someone else about this thing, about this insight. And so when you have to do that part and you can't do it, then effectively you failed at your job. And so I think that's kind of like how I've thought about it in the past, 4 years. Initially in year one, when I graduated, it was not as prominent, and I had that same misconception as everyone else did. And then by year 4, I realized that this is like the skill that I need to develop to basically move up like the career ladder if I wanted to, and basically, go up into becoming like more and more senior roles.
Wait, okay, I think I got lost a little bit. Are you talking about soft skills as a whole, or like what specific skill kind of helps you level up your career?
I think it's definitely the soft skills as a whole, but specifically the explanation of technical concepts to non-technical stakeholders, right?
Okay, so it's kind of like that data interpreter / data steward.
Exactly.
Space.
Yeah. Or just someone who can, I think communicate with almost everyone in that realm, right? Because if you think about yourself as like an engineering manager, data science manager, right? You have to talk to your individual contributors, the people that work for you that are deep in like maybe like extremely complex algorithms potentially, right? And then you have to communicate why those algorithms matter to the like stakeholders or the executives, the CEO even, about why it matters that they do something like this. And so, when we're thinking about responsibilities and just what actually it takes to like continue to develop your skills in terms of moving up the career ladder, I mean, being a better, even like business person and understanding like scope of all the issues that actually come up in a business, it's many times general communication, I think, plus communication of technical concepts.
Right. Because I think it's how does the work you've done drive a business initiative?
Yeah, that's true. I could see that as well.
Well, actually, that's my take on it. Do you agree or disagree?
I agree. I think that half of it is also communicating what you've done as well. And I think that especially when you are in larger organizations, I mean, you see this in a couple of places, and I'm sure you've seen this in your past too, where it's not only just about like what you've done, but also just getting buy-in, right, to do it in the first place, and then also at the end of the day, communicating that you've done it. Because I mean, I've worked for huge companies where it's like, at the end of the day, the level above you might not even know what you've done. Your own manager might not even be knowing what you've done sometimes. I've had like managers that have no idea what I'm doing, right? And that's not good.
No, I love that you bring that up, because I took 2 internships at a $12 billion company. But that's the only experience I have. My client base is 150 million in sales revenue or less. So I'm working with, I would say, medium-sized business. I kind of dipped into like small business, but it's really hard to carve out a living as a consultant working with those companies because they're not making that much revenue, and you have a 25% increase in sales, and they still might not want to pay you very much.
Yeah, exactly, right. And that kind of, it's like maybe they can attribute a portion of it to what you've done, but this is kind of off a side tangent. Unless you like fight for it, right? You almost have to fight for your attribution, even that like, oh, I did this, I helped you guys with this. There's like probably 1% of that 25% increase is probably mine. And it's kind of like what you have to do when you ask for promotions or even ask for raises as well, right? Because you go over the past like 12 months that you've worked somewhere and you'd be like, I did these things and they've helped the business grow like this, versus, someone who just says, I did everything you told me to do, but I have no idea how much that actually impacted the business. Maybe you can tell me. And that's not really a position you want to be in.
Yeah. And I noticed that with my client base, where some of my clients will keep the results close to the vest. And I have no idea the work that I'm like the actual impacts, but I've actually started making it a habit now of asking them flat out, how much of an impact did this have?
Yeah.
So like recently, one of my clients, I'm doing very, very simple like analytics tasks. Like they couldn't combine their cost data with their sales data. And we figured out that 3 out of the 5 of their sales SKUs were not generating any margin. So that was $100,000 to $150,000 a year value that the analysis that I did for them brought to them. So that's like a very concrete, but in that situation, I'm working directly with the CFO. So I think he can see it very clearly. And it's almost like I'm getting into almost an advisor role of here's what you should do to make more money.
Yeah.
Cause I'm actually kind of light on analytics skills. I see myself more as like a management consultant with like a, I don't know, data analysis / data visualization tilt.
Yep.
But I do work with data scientists sometimes. Like I'll pull them on a project if I need to build out, like doing some web scraping or some like predictive modeling.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, I mean, that's awesome. I think that's like the great place to be in general, right? Because once you actually have that higher level scope and like that view, then you can at least, it becomes more about like, at least when you're like a business owner or a consultant, about like delegation, and your insights are getting like 100% transferability in terms of their utility to the end consumer, right? Because many times if you don't work with someone like the CFO, or you're, pretend you're like the financial analyst and you deliver this result to your manager, then your manager gets like, let's say 90% of what you're saying, and then delivers that up to the CFO, and then he gets like 75% of that. And that kind of just, that utility kind of gets lost, right? But when you're coming in as a consultant, I think that's the benefit, is that you're basically, everything that you're doing, they're paying you directly. And so they have this like very direct connection with how much utility in terms of like they should be getting out of it. And they really do understand like the impact that you bring. And so that's where your results really get like the most kind of sway. And I think,
it's the difference, I think, between being part of the organization and overhead and being like a line item on the budget. Because if you're a full-time employee, and that's a really fascinating point that I had never really considered, of if you're working as a junior analyst and you report up to a senior analyst who reports up to an analytics manager that then reports to a VP, to the CFO or whoever, that signal of the value brought can start to get more and more diluted as it goes up the chain.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice on,
right?
What?
Like it's a combination of the whole team then. It's like, oh, our team then did this. That's great. And so in an ideal world, the analyst should move up, can prove that they did, all that work. But ultimately, sometimes it doesn't happen like that. Organizations are messy sometimes.
Well, okay. So I'm kind of putting on like my tactical hat here. Couldn't you speak directly to your direct manager and say, hey, maybe you can't say that the analysis I did drove X amount of revenue, but you could say I identified $130,000 worth of an under optimization in the supply chain. So
Oh
then,
yeah, for sure.
because I would say that is one of the most important things that Elizabeth harps on. So she's a career coach, is demonstrating your wins. And I think it's harder to have those bigger wins earlier on in your career, like if you're a junior analyst.
Yeah. Because for the most part, when you're a junior analyst, right, you need like lead support to tell you what to do even, right? Your job is many times to just kind of, for the most problem, just tackle small projects with small scopes. And that means many times like pulling reports, presenting data, but it's nothing big in terms of like attacking more of like a bigger project, which has more kind of complex nuances within it, right? And so I think that's kind of where it's like, okay, yeah, your manager does deserve credit because they told you to do the project. They told you exactly how to do it. They just didn't go up to the computer and like literally write SQL for you and like create the dashboard together, right? They basically told you what to create. And so it kind of gets to that point. It's like once you become the senior analyst, right, then you're effectively your manager will be like, hey, I need an idea of how to tackle this problem. And then you're like, okay, yeah, I can do that. And I can pull all the data for you. And you don't need to tell me what data points to pull because I already know what data points are relevant for, solving this problem. And I think that's kind of like how the general career progression kind of makes up. And so, yeah, if you're a junior analyst, you need to like, one, realize the value benefit that you did instead of just being just a,
yes, man.
Quote unquote, yeah, yes, man, yeah, like
a good boy, a good
whatever. And then after that, I think once you can realize that, then it's like, okay, now I have to prove the next level of expanding my like scope of knowledge, showing I can tackle bigger projects, and obviously break down problems into harder and harder problems at that point.
So something you mentioned was, well, okay, I guess let me ask you this. Does business acumen fall more so in a soft skill or a hard skill, or is it kind of like a in-between space?
Yeah, that's actually a great question because I think if you think about like business school in general, right? Like I haven't done much research on MBAs, but business has always fallen into a point where their curriculum has always taken like a little bit of math, some, I don't know, like accounting, case studies, economics, stuff like that, and kind of made its own sort of kind of almost type, right? And I think hard and soft skills have traditionally been kind of labeled by almost, I think soft skills as just like communicating, basically emotional like management, maybe even. And then like hard skills have been more around like logic and like the bare bones of like applying logic, right? In terms of like computer programming, statistics, math, and like coming up with like concrete results.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think that's why business is so fascinating. One, because it basically runs, the entire economy and is like the bread and butter for the United States and capitalism, and it's all that we care about. And then number two is that it's super complex, right? And it's at this point, it's basically it's not winner take all. It's just everyone can have their own business, and so having that business acumen, it's not really something you can really measure unless you start a business, right? And then you try to make as much money as you can, and then you compare your revenue or how well you're doing, I guess. But in general, I think it's hard to classify into a type. I'd say it's definitely on a spectrum in that case.
Well, so I think that, and this is going to be kind of out there, I think that to demonstrate your business acumen, you have to tell a narrative.
Mm-hmm.
To demonstrate hard skills, you can pass or fail a certification. So it's harder. It's kind of like sentiment analysis or psychographic data. It's harder to get into a specific quantifiable rating.
Yeah, there's no yes or no, black or white, like answer, right? I mean, there might be one if you can combine business with, you know, your work ethic, right? And then you obviously, you know, succeed at running a company, and even success there is arbitrary, or you kind of fail, in which the business, you know, doesn't start. And so the easiest one is just from ground up, right? Like, you want to start a business at day one. What does it look like at day 100? Have you succeeded or failed? You know, but even then, you know, time period matters.
Well,
And
it's also the market that you're in, like the external economic forces. Are you in a depression? Is there
yeah,
a pandemic that just wiped out the economy? Like,
yeah.
there's so many unknown factors that can have an impact. But okay, what I did want to ask you is, what is speaking of business and business acumen, I'm going to let you show your own business acumen. What is the power or value prop of interview query?
Yeah. So interview query, if for anyone that doesn't know, is like a website that I built with a co-founder to basically help data scientists help with their technical skills. And so in addition to that, obviously playing back to this question, we have obviously business case questions on there, product case questions relating to metrics, and definitely a lot of analytics kind of practice as well in terms of SQL questions or case questions. And so, yeah, I guess in terms of, I guess that business itself is it started around essentially providing a lot of content. And I think from my point of view, you know, the general perspective of how I've thought about that business and like the expectations has also transformed over time. And so initially it was something that I would dedicate, you know, a few hours a week. I'd write, you know, a couple case studies, a couple solutions, send it out in a newsletter, and then pass it out. And so, I mean, if you asked me, it was like, oh, is this a startup? I would have laughed at you, you know, a year ago, because I'd be like, no, it is not a startup. It is a newsletter hobby that for some reason a couple people are paying me for, right? And then, you know, asking that now it's definitely more of an actual business, because we've slowly and gradually over time just kind of grown it and gotten more customers and built out more functionality. And now it feels like it's more of a actual business, because of the fact of how it's, you know, sustaining my income and also my co-founder's kind of livelihood as we continue to build products that we see like there's an actual like need for in terms of getting people jobs and build up more functionality to get them jobs and stuff. And so, yeah, I think it definitely changed over perspective, but it was definitely, I guess the business side was way more about kind of just like doing a lot of research and almost just building like tools that our customers wanted and just doing that cycle again and again. So I guess breaking it down, it is definitely super hard to like think about how business kind of applied to that, because when you think about it, like what you're actually doing is just like a lot of writing, a lot of talking to people, and then somehow it kind of works out over a course of a year.
Okay, I thought you were going to have a completely different answer.
Oh, okay.
So and maybe I'm oversimplifying things here, and maybe that's my MBA brain of like this equals this. I feel like the fundamental problem is that universities and colleges have no idea how to do career services for the analyst or data science market.
Yeah, that is probably
that is the fundamental problem you solve, I think.
That it's true, because it's interesting, because I think a lot of the times also that there's like universities are solving this case of like learning for like learning's sakes, right? And I think you know, some people have this idea that you go to school and you graduate and then you get a degree, and the goal is then to get a job, or like the whole point of going to school is to get a job. And then I definitely have that kind of intuition, and like that's how I think of school right now, because of the fact of how expensive it is. But then other people just have like this, I think, better kind of holistic idea of school as just being a place where you learn the concepts, and it's a structured learning environment for you to just be able to sit down and learn it. And I think that's kind of a reason for why I would want to get, you know, an MBA myself, is because while all that content is, I'm sure, on the internet and free, I would never go out and do it myself ever, because it isn't
Really?
in an environment where I can just, learn it with other students, learn it with this teacher, and really like apply it to different kinds of problems and stuff.
I would say you're in the middle of like a hands-on MBA. You have started your own business. I know I'm serious. Like, I feel like I'm in my MBA 2.0 phase, or maybe 3.0,
Wow.
because like I'm going from in-person classes to having the consulting agency to like now I'm kind of moving into this place where I have multiple lines of business, and I want to build that, like a platform.
Yep.
Basically what you've done. But what I'll say about traditional education, well, actually, let me back up. We had Daniel Hall, who is the economic chair at High Point University, who coincidentally, after I had him on the podcast, 3 days later, he offered me a job teaching at HPU. So now he's like my boss, kind of. So he's my boss, I guess. I don't know. I don't like saying that. I don't like having boss.
What are you teaching?
I'm teaching Excel there, but in Greensboro College, I'm teaching data visualization and then the capstone course.
Oh, nice.
Gotcha. So I'm on the advisory council for Greensboro College.
Oh,
so
great.
I'll be advising. I'm advising and implementing the analytics, like the last 2 classes of that minor, which is I have no idea how it's going to go, but I'm leveraging the university to get more free work for my clients, essentially.
Yeah.
So, but everyone wins.
Yeah.
Like I get to strengthen my relationship with my clients. My client gets free work. Students get hands-on like expertise. They get like a use case that they can go and talk about in an interview. So I feel really good about that. But getting back to the Daniel Hall interview, he was talking about a degree as it goes back to economic signal theory, and it's a yes/no binary. Do you have a degree or do you not have a degree? Mm-hmm. And you're going to get weeded out of the candidate pool if you don't have a degree. And then it's essentially over the years has gotten more and more diluted.
Yeah.
So it used to be that a degree alone would be good enough to get you a good job. But now it's like you need a degree and a study abroad, or you need a degree and an internship, or a degree and 2 internships. And it's like it's such a paradox. It's such a paradox because it's getting less valuable, but more expensive at the same time.
Yeah.
Like, how does that work?
I think they've just gotten better at marketing, and not by following, definitely not the the literal sense of actually showing that it's gotten more expensive and diluted, I think, which can also be like very easily proven, I think, as well. But yeah, I would say that the people that are interested in, getting jobs, like maybe they shouldn't think about like getting a master's just so that they can get a data science job. And I think that's what I tell everyone, just because of the fact that it's not a guarantee, right? Like if you have that in your head, then you really need to, wipe it and like rethink the whole process, because at this point in time, that's, obviously, as you said, like not what it takes. And it's also the fact that is you can also get a, analytics or data science job without getting a master's as well. And so when the opportunity comes up, and you just have to look at all the different paths, right? And just kind of choose the one that you think is best for you. And I think a lot of the times that isn't just paying $50K in tuition money. Well,
it's a huge risk. And I think it's borderline predatory that we are not educating our like extremely young adults that this might not work out for you. Yeah. Like, what is the reality of being 25 and not having, and working at Starbucks and having $150,000 worth of debt?
Yes.
What does that look like?
Yeah.
And you know what? I don't want to sound like I'm like anti-education, because I do think it's valuable, but I think that some of the responsibility lies on the students to make the most of their time there.
Yeah.
And I'm like the poster boy for that, because in my undergrad, I studied econ and I just partied my ass off and like barely got a 3.0. I knew that I might want to go to grad school in the future. So I like put my sights at the bare minimum and just put in enough work. But then I worked for 3 years selling insurance, and it beat the crap out of me. And I was like, this is existentially terrifying to me. I don't want to do this for the rest. So then I went back to grad school, and I just like, I worked and worked and worked and worked at 3 internships. I mean, my grades were significantly higher, although I guess grad school grades don't really matter. It's not like I guess I could get a PhD, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if I actually like the education or academia space. So I start next week.
I think teaching, there's a lot of just general intrinsic like value out of it too, right? Because you're one, proving how well you know the subject, and then 2, you're also providing a general net benefit onto the world, right? Because you're not guaranteeing them jobs, but you're at least like giving them knowledge and doing so in a structured way that actually provides a lot of value for everyone who's like attending. And so I think also like the kind of other half side about universities is that like when you put in the money for it, right, you're almost kind of like guaranteeing that you're going to work hard for it, especially for grad school, because of the fact that like it's kind of like that idea of putting down money for something so that you are like willing to put time and effort into it. It's like a gym membership, right? Like a really expensive gym membership. If you don't go, then it's just going to waste away.
It's because you've got skin in the game.
Yeah, you have skin in the game, exactly, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you've heard of Nassim Taleb, but he wrote a book called that.
His many theories. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. I've recently gone down the Nassim Taleb and Naval Ravikant rabbit hole, which they're fascinating, but I don't think they're super relevant for the How to Get an Analytics Job podcast. But yeah, kind of getting back to center of how to get an analytics job. Do you have any advice for I guess there's 2 specific demographics within our podcast. So there are young students who are in undergrad and trying to get their first job. And then there are others who they've worked for, I don't know, say 10 to 15 years and want to pivot into the analytics space. Do you have any advice for either of those 2 demographics?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that the best thing that you can do, I think always, is showcase an internal motivation and for doing so and for getting an analytics job. And so by listening to this podcast, you are already, in that group, buy-in, right?
Love
the other thing,
listen to me more.
is then to demonstrate those skills, right? And to demonstrate to potential employers how interested you are in analytics. And I think to do that requires a lot of kind of self-learning. And I think that's kind of where the motivation comes into the point, because it is really hard to self-learn, I think, without just general motivation on your own. And I think, with the university format, you can take classes, and that's really beneficial, and that kind of helps you learn the fundamentals. But then it's like analytics is all about kind of like real world problems, right? It's on business problems. It's on, even basketball, sports, anything. You can apply analytics to anything, right? And so I think the biggest advice I give to people is always to like showcase your interest in analytics by doing a project, doing some sort of analytics analysis of anything that you're interested in to kind of combine your interests. And that way you're going to probably create like the best sort of project that you could do, because it combines multiple things you're interested in, and then also analytics, which is what you're studying, into like a really interesting blog post or, web application that is kind of like part of your portfolio. And I think the one thing I see a lot of the days now, especially you have too, I bet, is just seeing these like portfolio projects on students' resumes where they're just like class projects or, Kaggle projects. And I feel like everyone's talked endlessly about this, but it's just like, please just don't do something like that where it's cut and dry, where someone else told you to do it. Do something where you wanted to do it, and it'll turn out much better, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that like kind of an out of the box sales dashboard on Tableau Public probably won't, because I actually tell my students that of like, here we built out, a supply chain or supply and demand dashboard. You should go and customize this before you post it publicly, because if it's the same dashboard across 300 different people, it's, I don't know. It doesn't have that same punch. But I will say, yeah, like having like sport, like Kenji studying sports data. You know, if you're fascinated by that, you can show that you're like super engaged, and then you're telling this narrative. It's intoxicating. So I've been listening to, I don't know if you've heard of Dan Carlin, but he does a series called Hardcore History, and he's talking through the fall of Rome, and you can just tell that he's spent hours and hours researching this, talking about, you know, Julius Caesar and Cato and how they had like, you know, these civil disagreements and like the wars. And it's just like, it's so intoxicating. And I think if you're talking about, oh, well, I took this course and here's this very generic Excel data file and I turned it into this dashboard, versus, you know, Kobe Bryant was my favorite player, and I did a breakdown of, you know, the past 15 years of, you know, his percentage of, I don't know, 3-pointers, I don't know, something that you specifically care about. And then it gets to showcase your personality, but also it shows that you have those technical chops.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think to go back to your last point, right, it's to do something on Kobe Bryant and just basketball in general, right? Like, it makes sense why you do something like that, because other people are interested in it too, right? If you do like a sales dashboard, right? Like, if I read a sales dashboard and, you know, it's something generic and it's for, I don't know, like healthcare sales.
Yeah, who's sales?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, what is this? Like, I don't even know what this company is, right? And so doing a project on something that people know about and would garner likes and even attention is, I think, a default thing that you have to just think about, because you have to think about who your audience is, right? Your audience is recruiters looking at your resume. It's hiring managers. It's other people in the space. But they're all like kind of normal people with like normal common, you know, interests like basketball, sports, and, you know, other things. And so I think that's where it's kind of about showcasing something, right? Such as, you know, TV analytics or basketball, but also just doing it in a way that is insightful, and which something that they didn't know about before, right? So it's like, it's not something I'll go on ESPN to read about, but it's something new and more in depth that's interesting. I think the metaphor to like the fall of Rome is great, because it's like, yeah, we all know Rome is. We all know that it was a huge civilization that fell, but now like, oh wow, this is a more in-depth, like super like interesting just TV show about it, where this guy knows everything about it. Then yeah, of course I'm going to watch it at that point. And so
yeah, well, I think that's a good point. You kind of want to make almost potentially viral content.
Yes.
You want people to share it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can speak to the value of something you create getting traction. So I brought up Daniel Hall. He actually took my Tableau course and used that to train himself to now he teaches Tableau in his econ department. So like that was such a, just grabbing a, so we did the podcast episode and then grabbed a beer because I wanted to talk to him about like this new platform idea I had. And then a day later he was like, hey, this job is open. Do you want it? So it was like, if you do a portfolio or you have content that is like analytical in nature, it can do the selling for you. You can get the job basically. I mean, you're still going to have to like kind of, although I didn't have a formal interview with HPU. We just grabbed a beer and then talked. Yeah. So
exactly. Because he already knew who you were. Like, you had the qualification, right? You had the portfolio, it's out there. And so that's kind of how, like, at that point, that's kind of how anyone, the best people get their jobs right now, right? Is that they're well known. They have this portfolio. They've already worked with this person in the past. It's like, obviously sometimes like the interview that they have to do is just kind of like this, what do you call it? This like a fake kind of interview. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, we know that the higher up has already proved this. They're just doing this for show.
And then you feel bad for the people who got brought in.
Yeah, exactly.
Just waste their time. It's so mean.
Yeah, it's
but yeah, essentially you're playing 4D chess at that point.
Yeah.
But it's hard though, especially getting your, when you're in that early stage of your career to really do that. I guess it kind of happens on a much lower tier, to where I actually met this girl on Tinder who was the valedictorian of my MBA's cohort, 2 or 3 years later. And she had already got a job lined up, like well before she graduated, just because she had, 4.0 or whatever.
Yeah.
You can kind of play those games, because it's all branding. The fact that she was the top student, because I went to UNCG, so it's not like I went to like Stanford or like, I don't know, some of these name brand schools. So but they have a very clearly defined pipeline. So if you can get in that kind of top 1 or 2, then almost you're guaranteed a job at that point.
Yeah. I can see that.
Cool. Well, I think we've been rattling on for quite some time now, but I'm fascinated with this whole interview query, and I mean, congrats on going full time. That's a huge deal.
Yeah, and I'd love to talk to you more about it. We have more time actually, just go over it some more. But if anyone's interested or has an interview coming up, please check out Interview Query. We have constantly improving the product every day, and you're giving feedback directly to the founder when you sign up. So
exactly, go check it out. All right, thank you.
All right. Thanks, John.